The Omega they dragged into King Kaelan Voidheart's throne room was meant to be a weapon, a curse wrapped in chains and broken flesh. What his enemies didn't know was that the moment her terrified golden eyes met his, the mate bond snapped into place like a blade between his ribs. Kaelan kept his face stone. 20 years of survival in the most brutal court in the Northern Territories had taught him that much. Show nothing. Feel nothing. Let them see only the monster they expected. The southern emissaries smiled like wolves who'd already tasted blood. "A gift of peace, Your Majesty." Lord Varon stepped forward, his oiled beard gleaming in the torchlight. "From the Southern Coalition, with our deepest respects." Kaelan didn't move from his throne. The great hall stretched before him, cold stone and colder shadows, packed with courtiers who watched this exchange like vultures circling a dying animal. His court. His wolves. Most of them would gut him for the crown if they thought they could survive the attempt. "I expected gold," he said. "Or territory concessions. This gift is worth far more." Varen's smile widened. "Her name is Serah, last of the cursed bloodline of Ashfall. Every alpha who has claimed her has died within the year. 3 so far. Horrible deaths. All of them." The guards shoved the Omega forward and she stumbled, the silver chains at her wrists and ankles clanking against the stone floor. A leather muzzle covered the lower half of her face. Her dress, if it could be called that, was little more than rags hanging off thin shoulders. Scars peeked from beneath the fabric. Old ones. New ones. A map of suffering written across her skin. She raised her head, golden eyes met his and the world cracked open. Kaelan felt the bond slam into his chest like a war hammer. Heat flooded his veins, followed immediately by ice. His wolf, dormant for so long he'd almost forgotten its voice, howled inside him with a fury that rattled his bones. Mine. Mate. Mine. Impossible. He was 34 years old. He'd bedded more women than he could count, taken chosen mates for political alliance, attended 100 bonding ceremonies for wolves in his pack. The mate bond was supposed to be instant, undeniable. If he had one, it should have appeared years ago. Unless he'd never met her before. Unless she'd been hidden away, sold from alpha to alpha, kept in chains and darkness, while he conquered the north and built an empire on blood. His claws bit into the arms of his throne. The wood groaned. "You bring me an execution?" he asked, and his voice came out as cold as he needed it to be. "The Coalition wishes me to kill this Omega publicly?" "Precisely, Your Majesty." Varen's eyes glittered with poorly hidden triumph. "Prove the curse means nothing to the great Voidheart. Show our alliance is sealed in her blood," the courtiers murmured. Kaelan could feel their attention sharpening, could smell the subtle shifts in their sense. Fear, excitement, calculation. Everyone was always calculating. The Omega, Serah, watched him. Her eyes held no hope, no plea, just the flat, exhausted patience of an animal who had learned that fighting only made the pain worse. Something cracked inside his chest. Something he'd thought died a long time ago. "Take her to the dungeons," he said. Varen's smile faltered. "Your Majesty?" "I don't execute gifts in haste, Lord Varon. If this Omega is as cursed as you claim, I'll want my seers to examine her first. My priests to bless the blade." He let a cruel smile touch his lips. "I'll make a spectacle of it. 3 days from now, the whole capital can watch." The lie came easily. Lies always did. Varon recovered, bowing low. "Of course, Your Majesty. Your wisdom is legendary." Kaelan watched the guards drag Serah away. She didn't struggle, didn't look back. Just let them pull her toward the dungeons like a puppet whose strings had been cut. The bond pulled at him, a hook beneath his ribs, and it took every ounce of control he possessed not to leap from the throne and slaughter everyone who touched her. 3 days, he thought. I have 3 days to figure out what the hell is happening and how to survive it. The moment court ended, Kaelin found his spymaster. Tyrus had served 3 kings before Kaelin. He was old, scarred, and utterly without loyalty to anyone but himself, which made him the most trustworthy wolf in the castle. You always knew where you stood with a man who would sell you out for the right price. "Move the Omega," Kaelin said without preamble. "Tonight. Use the hidden passages. Put her in the eastern chambers, the ones that don't officially exist." Tyrus raised an eyebrow. The old wolf had only one eye left, and it missed nothing. "The cursed one? You believe the stories?" "I believe the Southern Coalition wants me to execute her very badly, which means I want to know why." A reasonable answer. A strategic answer. Tyrus nodded. Accepting it. He didn't need to know about the bond. Nobody needed to know about the bond. Not until Kaelin understood what it meant, why it had appeared now, whether it was real or some elaborate trap designed to destroy him. "Done," Tyrus said. "What else?" "Everything. Find out everything about the Ashfall bloodline, every alpha who claimed her, how they died, when they died, who benefited. That will take time. Then start now." Tyrus melted into the shadows without another word. Kaelin stood alone in the cold stone corridor and pressed his hand against his chest, feeling the pulse of the bond beneath his palm. Mate. He had never wanted a mate, had never expected one. The kind of king he'd become, the monster the North required, didn't deserve something so sacred. And yet, he went to her at midnight. The hidden chambers were deep in the castle's bones, accessible only through passages that appeared on no map. Kaelin had discovered them as a boy, hiding from his father's rages. Now they served other purposes. 2 guards stood outside the door, his personal wolves, loyal to him and him alone. They stepped aside without question. Sarah sat on the narrow bed, still in her rags, but someone had removed the muzzle and chains. She looked up when he entered. "Here to kill me yourself, then?" Her voice was rough from disuse, but steady. No fear, just that terrible patience. The other alphas liked to do it slowly. The bond pulsed between them, hot and demanding. Kaelin could feel her, exhaustion, pain, the dull grey fog of someone who had stopped hoping years ago. She couldn't feel him. The bond was there, but she hadn't recognized it. Perhaps she was too damaged. Perhaps she'd buried herself so deep that nothing could reach her. "I'm not going to kill you," he said. "That's what the second one said, right before he chained me in his cellar and—" She stopped, swallowed. "You're all the same, just with different excuses." Kaelin didn't move closer. Every instinct screamed at him to touch her, to comfort her, to wrap her in his arms and tear apart anyone who'd ever hurt her. He stayed perfectly still. "The alphas who claimed you," he said carefully. "How did they die?" Something flickered in her golden eyes. "The curse." "There is no curse." Now she looked at him, really looked. "You don't know anything." "Then tell me." Silence stretched between them. Sarah studied his face like she was searching for the trap, the trick, the cruelty hiding behind his words. "Lord Harren," she said finally. "The first. Claimed me when I was 17, died 6 months later, poisoned by his brother, who wanted his territory. And the second? Alpha Cole of the Eastern Swamps. Took me as a war prize. Died in his sleep 8 months later. His beta smothered him. I watched. The third?" Her jaw tightened. "Baron Vance. He liked pain. Liked giving it." Her hand drifted to a scar on her collarbone. "He died 2 weeks ago. His own daughter put a knife in his back." Kaelin's mind raced. "You were there, each time. I was there. And you knew. Before it happened, you knew something was wrong." The flicker in her eyes became something sharper. Wariness. Fear. "What are you asking me?" "I'm asking what you really are. Sarah, of Ashfall." She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. "I see things, sense things. Betrayal. I can feel it like a sickness in the air. The wolves who claimed me, their courts were rotten. Conspiracies everywhere. I tried to warn them at first, tried to tell them their own people wanted them dead. They didn't listen. They thought I was mad, or lying, or, she laughed bitterly, cursed. It was easier to believe I was cursed. The pieces clicked into place. Kaelin's blood ran cold. The Southern Coalition, he said slowly. They didn't give you to me hoping you'd curse me. They gave you to me knowing what you are, knowing you'd sense the traitors in my court. Sarah's eyes widened. She hadn't worked that out, too tired, too battered to see the larger game. They want me dead, Kaelin continued, but they can't do it themselves. My armies are too strong. So they plant you here, wait for you to sniff out my vulnerabilities, my enemies within. Then they contact whoever's plotting against me and offer an alliance. I wouldn't. They don't need your cooperation, just your instincts. You flinch when a certain lord walks by. You tense when someone speaks. A clever spy would notice, would report back. The colour drained from Sarah's face. They sold me as a weapon, against you. Against both of us, she stared at him. Something new flickered in those golden eyes. Not hope, not yet, but the distant cousin of it. Confusion. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Why not just kill me and be done with it? Simpler, safer. Kaelin moved closer. He couldn't help it. The bond pulled him forward like a tide. He stopped an arm's length away and looked down at his mate, this broken, brilliant, terrifying woman who could destroy empires with nothing but the truth. Because you're mine, he said quietly, and I protect what's mine. The bond flared between them, and this time he saw Sarah feel it. Her breath caught. That's, she whispered, that's impossible. But her hand reached toward him anyway, trembling, and when her fingers touched his chest, Kaelin felt the bond lock into place like a key, turning in a lock that had been waiting, all this time, for exactly this moment. In the hidden chambers of a castle full of enemies, the most dangerous alpha in the Northern Territories knelt before a scarred Omega who could see betrayal in the hearts of men. Help me find my traitors, he said, and I will burn the Southern Coalition to ash. Sarah's golden eyes met his. I'll need better clothes first, she said. And for the first time in 20 years, King Kaelin Voidheart smiled. Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Chapter 2. The king came to her at midnight again. Sarah had counted the hours by the changing of guards outside her door, by the way shadows shifted across the stone walls, by the distant bells that rang from somewhere deep in the castle. She'd learned to measure time in captivity. It was one of the few things that still belonged to her. The door opened without ceremony. Kaelin Voidheart entered carrying a wooden box and a lantern, and he was alone. No guards, no witnesses, just the most feared alpha in the Northern Territories, standing in her hidden chamber like a man paying a social call. You should be sleeping, he said. So should you. He set the lantern on the small table by the bed. The light caught his face, and Sarah studied him the way she'd learned to study all alphas, searching for the warning signs, the tells that preceded violence, the tightening around the eyes, the flecks of fingers, the subtle shift in scent that meant pain was coming. She found none of it. Kaelin opened the wooden box and removed bandages, a clay pot of salve, clean cloths, medical supplies. He laid them out with the precision of someone who'd done this many times before. Your wounds need tending, he said. The silver chains caused burns. They'll scar badly if left untreated. They'll scar anyway. Not as badly. He looked at her then, and something moved behind those cold grey eyes. Will you let me? Sarah didn't understand the question. Alphas didn't ask. Alphas took. Let you what? Tend your wounds. She stared at him. The words made sense individually, but strung together they formed a sentence that belonged to some other world, Some other life where kings knelt before omegas and asked permission to touch. Why? The question came out harsher than she intended. Kaelin was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was lower, rougher. Because someone should have done this a long time ago. Because no one did. Because... He stopped, started again. Because the mate bond means I can feel your pain, and it's making me want to tear this castle apart stone by stone until I find everyone who ever hurt you. The honesty of it struck her like a physical blow. You could just order me to let you. I could. He didn't move, didn't reach for her, just waited, the bandages in his hands, the salve warming in the lantern light. But I won't. Sarah had been sold to 3 alphas. She had been chained, muzzled, starved, beaten, and worse. She had learned that kindness was a trap, that gentle words preceded the cruelest punishments, that hope was a weapon her captors used to break her more thoroughly. But the mate bond didn't lie. She could feel him through it now, had been feeling him since last night, when their connection had locked into place. His emotions bled through in fragments. Anger, but not at her. Grief, old and deep as a wound that never healed. And underneath it all, a fierce protectiveness that burned like fire. He wasn't lying, he wasn't pretending, he was asking. Slowly, Sarah extended her wrists. The silver burns were ugly, red and blistered, weeping in places where the metal had pressed deepest. Kaelin drew in a sharp breath when he saw them. His jaw tightened. But his hands, when they touched her, were impossibly gentle. He cleaned the wounds with warm water, his movements careful and precise. The salve was cool against her burning skin. He wrapped the bandages with the expertise of someone who'd tended battlefield injuries. You've done this before, Sarah said, many times. For your soldiers? For myself. She looked at him, really looked. In the dim light, with his attention on her wounds, the mask he wore in public had slipped. She saw exhaustion in the shadows under his eyes, tension in the set of his shoulders, and something else, something haunted. The scars, she said quietly. On your arms. I saw them when you rolled up your sleeves. Kaelin's hands stilled for just a moment. Then he continued rapping, his voice carefully neutral. Everyone has scars. Not like those. Those are... She hesitated. Those are fighting pit brands. The silence that followed was absolute. Sarah knew those marks. She'd seen them before, on the bodies of wolves who'd survived the underground death matches that wealthy alphas staged for entertainment. Slaves fighting slaves, children fighting children. The winners lived, the losers died, and the alphas bet gold on the outcomes. Very few wolves survived the pits. Fewer still escaped them. Where did you see fighting pit brands? Kaelin asked, and his voice had gone very, very quiet. Baron Vance, my 3rd alpha. He attended the matches. Made me watch. The memories rose like bile in her throat. He said it would teach me my place. Show me what happened to Omegas, who displeased their masters. Kaelin finished wrapping her wrists. He didn't let go. His hands stayed curled around hers, warm and steady. The wolves in those pits, he said. What did you see in them? Fear. Rage. The kind of emptiness that happens when you've been hurt so long you stop being a person. She paused. And survival. The absolute determination to live no matter what it cost. Did you pity them? I understood them. Kaelin looked up. Their eyes met, and Sarah saw something crack open in his expression. A door he'd kept locked for decades swinging open just a fraction. I was 8 years old when they took me, he said. My father sold me to pay a gambling debt. I spent 6 years in the pits before I killed my owner and escaped. The words hung in the air between them. Sarah's breath caught. The mate bond flooded with emotion. His emotion, decades of buried pain rising to the surface like blood from a reopened wound. The stories about you, she whispered. The Void Heart King, the monster of the north, the alpha who shows no mercy. Armor. His voice was rough. Every piece of it. I built a reputation so terrifying that no one would ever try to chain me again. Every execution, every brutal decree, every calculated act of cruelty, all of it designed to make them fear me too much to see the truth. What truth? That I'm still that boy in the pit, that I wake up some nights certain I'm back in chains, that every time I show weakness, I expect someone to drag me back to the fights and make me kill for their entertainment. Tears burned behind Sarah's eyes. She blinked them back fiercely. She'd stopped crying years ago. Crying didn't help. Crying just made them laugh. But this was different. This was a king on his knees before her, offering his deepest wound like a gift. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because you're my mate. Because you can sense lies and I wanted you to know I'm not hiding anything from you." He paused. "And because you flinched when I reached for you earlier. You expected me to hurt you. I need you to understand that I never will." Sarah thought of all the promises she'd heard before. All the gentle words that preceded violence. All the alphas who'd sworn they were different. But Kaelin's emotions bled through the bond. Raw and unguarded. He wasn't performing. He wasn't manipulating. He was simply telling the truth and waiting to see if she could accept it. "I don't know how to trust," she said. "I don't know if I remember how." "I know." He released her hands and sat back. "I'm not asking for your trust. I'm asking for time. Let me prove that I mean what I say. Let me show you who I am when no one's watching. And if I can't, if I'm too broken," something softened in his expression, "then we'll be broken together. And maybe that's enough." She slept. For the first time in months, maybe years, Sarah slept without nightmares. The mate bond hummed between them like a lullaby. And even though Kaelin had returned to his own chambers, she could feel him at the edge of her consciousness. A warm presence. A guardian in the dark. She woke to late morning light filtering through the narrow window. Someone had brought food while she slept. Real food, not the scraps and slop she'd grown used to. Fresh bread, soft cheese, sliced fruit, cold meat. A pitcher of clear water and another of something that smelled like honeyed tea. She ate carefully, her starved body protesting at the sudden abundance. Too much too fast would make her sick. She knew that from experience. The door opened. Sarah tensed, expecting guards, expecting violence, expecting the dream to end the way all dreams ended, with chains and pain and the cold laughter of wolves who saw her as nothing but a tool. But it was Kaelin who entered, and he wasn't alone. A woman walked beside him, tall, sharp-featured, with the same grey eyes as the king but softer somehow, like steel wrapped in silk. Her dark hair was braided away from her face and she wore riding clothes rather than a gown. Practical, expensive, and chosen by someone who valued function over appearance. "So," the woman said, looking Sarah up and down, "this is her." Sarah's oracle senses flared. The woman, she must be Lady Mira, the king's sister, carried no betrayal in her scent. No hidden malice, no calculated cruelty, just curiosity, assessment, and something that might have been carefully restrained hope. "Lady Mira found the hidden passages," Kaelin said. His voice was calm, but Sarah felt tension bleeding through the bond. "She's known about your true location for 2 days. And you didn't tell me?" "I wanted to observe, to understand." Mira stepped closer and Sarah resisted the urge to shrink back against the wall. "The Southern Coalition has been running spies through our court for 3 years. I've been hunting them almost as long. When I heard they'd sent you as a gift, I knew it wasn't coincidence. You know what I am. I know what they think you are. A weapon. A tool to expose our vulnerabilities." Mira's eyes were sharp as blades. "But I also know what you could be if we play this correctly." "Mira," Kaelin's voice carried a warning. "She needs to understand the full picture, brother. She's not some fragile doll to be protected from the truth." Mira turned to Sarah. "There are at least 6 traitors in my brother's inner circle. I've identified 3 with certainty. The others are shadows. I know they exist, but I can't prove it. Every time I get close, evidence disappears. Witnesses die. And the Southern Coalition grows bolder. Sarah's mind raced. 3 traitors confirmed, 3 unknown, and one of them. The vision hit her without warning. She saw Vaughn, the beta commander, standing in a torchlit room. Southern Coalition banners hung on the walls. He was speaking with someone whose face remained in shadow, but his words came through clear as bells. The king grows suspicious. We need to accelerate the timeline. The Omega? She'll be dead within the week. Either the execution proceeds or... Vaughn smiled, and it was the smile of a wolf who'd already tasted blood. We arrange an accident. Either way, she won't have time to expose us. The vision shattered. Sarah gasped, stumbling backward. Kalen caught her before she fell, his hands steady on her shoulders. "What did you see?" he demanded. "Vaughn." The name came out in a rasp. "Your beta commander. He's been communicating with the Southern Coalition for months. They're planning to kill me before the execution, make it look like an accident. He said to accelerate the timeline." Silence. Mira's expression didn't change, but something fierce flashed in her eyes. "I suspected Vaughn. I could never prove it. Now you can." Kalen's voice was ice. "Now we all can." But Sarah was shaking her head, the vision still echoing in her skull. "There's more. The person he was speaking to. I couldn't see their face, but they were here. In the castle. Someone with authority. Someone Vaughn deferred to. Another traitor. Higher than Vaughn. Much higher." Kalen and Mira exchanged a look. Something passed between them. Sibling communication. Years of shared survival compressed into a single glance. "We need to move carefully," Mira said. "If we expose Vaughn now, the other traitors will scatter. Go to ground. We'll never catch them all. And if we wait, they'll kill Sarah. Then we don't wait. We adapt." Mira's smile was sharp as a blade. "The execution is in 2 days. What if we give them exactly what they expect and use it to draw them out?" That night, Sarah heard the servants. She'd crept to the door of her hidden chamber, pressing her ear against the wood, straining to catch any fragment of information that might help her survive. The mate bond told her Kalen was far away, somewhere in the upper castle, meeting with advisors, playing the role of the brutal king. But servants talked. Servants always talked. And sound carried strangely in these old stone corridors. 5 of them, they say. 5 Omega candidates the previous king presented to him. And he killed them all. Everyone. They say his heart's dead. Can't feel the mate bond anymore, not after what they did to him in those pits. Poor things. Coming here expecting to become queen and ending up in shallow graves. Better them than us. At least we know what he is. They came in with hope. The voices faded as the servants moved away. Sarah stood frozen, her blood running cold. 5 Omega candidates, all dead by Kalen's hand. She thought of his gentleness last night, his confession about the fighting pits, the way he'd asked permission before touching her wounds, the raw emotion bleeding through the bond. Had it all been a performance? Was she just another Omega candidate? Another victim who'd walked willingly into the monster's lair? The mate bond pulsed with warmth, with protection, with something that felt terrifyingly like devotion. But bonds could be faked. She'd heard stories of wolves who could manipulate the connection, project false emotions, create the illusion of love where none existed. She didn't know what to believe. She didn't know if she could afford to believe anything. Kalen came to her again that night. Later this time, past midnight, closer to dawn. He looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, tension carved into every line of his face. He'd been fighting battles all day, she realized. Political battles. The kind that didn't bleed but could kill you just as dead. He brought more medical supplies. Fresh bandages, a different salve for the burns that were starting to heal. He didn't speak at first, just sat beside her on the narrow bed and reached for her wrists with those impossibly gentle hands. "I heard the servants," Sarah said. Kaylin's hands stilled. They said you killed 5 Omega candidates, women the previous king tried to match you with. He didn't deny it, didn't explain, just sat there, his head bowed, his shoulders carrying the weight of something too heavy to name. Tell me it isn't true, Sarah whispered. I can't. The words hit her like a blow. She tried to pull away, but Kaylin didn't let go of her wrists. Not painfully, not forcefully, but with the quiet determination of someone who needed her to understand. They were assassins, he said. Every one of them. Sent by enemies who thought an Omega could get close enough to kill me. The first one had poison in her rings. The second carried a silver blade sewn into her corset. The third, his voice roughened, the third almost succeeded. She was very good, very patient. She waited 3 months before she made her move. Sarah stopped struggling. I didn't want to kill them. I didn't want any of it. But they came for my throat, and I survived. That's what I do. It's all I know how to do. He looked up, and his grey eyes were shattered. The stories call me a monster because it's easier than the truth. The truth is that everyone who's ever tried to love me has been sent to destroy me instead. Sarah thought of her own history. 3 alphas who'd claimed her. 3 courts full of betrayal and poison. 3 times she'd watched wolves die while everyone blamed her for the curse. They were both survivors of impossible wars. They were both carrying scars that would never fully heal. And me? She asked quietly. How do you know I'm not another assassin? I don't. His honesty was brutal, beautiful. But the mate bond is real. I feel it. And I felt nothing with any of them. No connection, no recognition. Just emptiness where the bond should have been. Maybe they were pretending. You can't pretend the mate bond. Not to an alpha. Not to a wolf who's spent years learning to sense every kind of threat. He released her wrists and sat back. You're not an assassin, Sarah. You're exactly what the Coalition fears. Someone who can expose every lie in this castle. Someone who can see the truth. Sarah looked at him. This broken king who'd built an empire on blood because blood was all anyone had ever shown him. This man who'd survived the fighting pits and never truly escaped them. This alpha who asked permission before touching her wounds. Tell me about the scars, she said. Something flickered in his expression. Which ones? All of them, he told her. The fighting pit brands, the whip marks from trainers who'd beaten him into submission, the claw marks from other wolves he'd been forced to battle, the burns from silver they'd used to control him, the careful, deliberate cuts from owners who'd wanted to mark him as property. He told her about the first wolf he'd killed, a boy barely older than him, terrified and desperate, fighting for survival in a pit while alphas cheered overhead. He told her about the years that followed, the endless string of fights, the way he'd learned to shut off every human feeling just to survive until the next match. He told her about the night he'd finally escaped, the blood on his hands, the fire he'd set that consumed the entire compound, the long journey north running on instinct and rage, building the persona of the Void Heart monster, one brutal act at a time. And Sarah listened. She didn't flinch, didn't judge, just sat beside him in the dim light of the hidden chamber and bore witness to horrors that had shaped him into the wolf he'd become. When he finished, dawn was breaking outside the narrow window. Kaylin sat with his head in his hands, emptied out, stripped of every defense. The most feared alpha in the Northern Territories, brought to his knees by the simple act of telling the truth. Sarah reached out. Her hand trembled as it crossed the space between them. She expected him to pull away, expected the mask to slam back into place, expected the king to return and banish the broken boy she'd glimpsed. But Kaylin stayed still. Her fingers touched his shoulder, tracing the curve of a scar that disappeared beneath his shirt. Old damage, healed wrong. The kind of mark that ached in cold weather and never let you forget. He shuddered beneath her touch. When was the last time someone touched you gently? Sarah whispered. Kaylin's voice cracked. I don't remember. The mate bond flooded with emotion, not just his, but hers. Something shifting between them, deepening, becoming more than the initial spark that had ignited in the throne room. This was real. This was true. This was two broken wolves recognizing each other in the dark. She slid closer. Her other hand found another scar, this one on his arm, the raised ridge of a whip mark that must have burned when it was fresh. She traced it with her fingertips, gentle as breath. Kaelin made a sound low in his throat. Not pain. Something else. Something that sounded almost like relief. I don't know how to do this, Sarah admitted. I don't know how to trust. I don't know how to let someone close. Everyone who's ever touched me has wanted to hurt me. I know. His voice was raw. I know. But I want... She stopped, started again. I want to try. With you. Whatever this is, whatever we're becoming, I want to see what it looks like when it's not a trap. Kaelin lifted his head. His grey eyes met hers and the mask was gone entirely. She saw the boy who'd survived the pits, the man who'd built an empire on fear. The alpha who'd given up on ever finding something soft in a world made of blades. Then we try, he said. Together. The door slammed open. Lady Mira strode in and her face was pale with urgency. They've moved up the timeline. Vaughn just convinced the council to schedule the execution for tomorrow morning. Sarah's blood went cold. Kaelin, she started. But the king was already on his feet, and the mask was back, the brutal, terrifying Voidheart monster that had conquered the north. Only now Sarah could see what it really was. Armor. The armor of a boy who'd learned that monsters survive. Then we give them their execution, Kaelin said, and his smile was pure predator. And we make sure they never see what's coming. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 3. The War Council convened in the hour before dawn. Sarah sat in the corner of Mira's private chambers, wrapped in a borrowed cloak, watching wolves who could end her life with a single-word debate, her fate like she was a piece on a game board, which she supposed she was. The glamour will hold for 6 hours, said the woman called Thessaly. She was old, grey-haired, with eyes that held the strange depth of those who'd spent too long staring into the spaces between worlds. A witch, Mira had called her, one of the last who still practiced the old magic. Any longer, and the illusion will begin to flicker. Your audience will need to be convinced within that window. The execution itself will take less than an hour, Mira said. The feast afterward is the concern. We need the traitors relaxed, celebrating their victory. That's when they'll make mistakes. That's when we'll take them. Kaelin stood by the window, his back to the room, watching the first pale light of morning creep across the castle grounds. He hadn't looked at Sarah since they'd arrived. The bond between them hummed with tension, with fear, with something that felt like grief held at arm's length. All of them, simultaneously, before they can warn each other. For that, we need names. Mira turned to Sarah. All the names, not just Vaughn and the ones I've already identified. Everyone connected to the conspiracy. Sarah felt the weight of their attention settle on her like chains. My visions don't work that way. I can't just summon them at will. They come when I'm near betrayal, when I touch someone whose heart holds treachery. Then we get you close enough to touch. Mira's voice was matter-of-fact. The feast preparations begin today. Servants everywhere, nobles arriving from across the territory to witness the execution of the cursed Omega. We disguise you as household staff. You move through the crowd, brush against the suspects, trigger your visions. And if someone recognizes her, Kaelin's voice was sharp. He still didn't turn around. They won't. Thessaly's glamour can alter surface features, hair color, the shape of her face. Enough to fool casual observation. Nothing about this will be casual. The Southern Coalition will have watchers everywhere, which is why we need every traitor identified before the feast. Mira crossed to Sarah, crouching before her with an intensity that reminded Sarah uncomfortably of her brother. Can you do this? Touch perhaps dozens of wolves, trigger multiple visions, maintain a disguise while your mind is being torn apart by glimpses of conspiracy? Sarah thought of the visions she'd already experienced, the shattering pain of them, the way they left her gasping and disoriented, the way each one carved a piece of her away and filled the hollow with someone else's darkness. Yes, she said. Mira's eyes narrowed. You answered too quickly, because the alternative is dying tomorrow, a real death, not a staged one. Sarah met the other woman's gaze without flinching. I've survived worse than visions. I'll survive this. Something flickered in Mira's expression. Not quite respect, but the potential for it. Then we begin immediately. Thessaly will apply the glamour at midday. I'll brief you on the court, who to approach, who to avoid, the layout of the halls. By evening, you'll be serving wine to wolves who want you dead. Sarah nodded. But before Mira could rise, she spoke again. I want something in return. The room went still. Kalen finally turned from the window. His face was carved from stone, but the bond betrayed him. A spike of something that felt like fear lancing through the connection between them. Name it, Mira said carefully. When this is over, when the traitors are exposed and the Southern Coalition's plot is destroyed, I want my freedom. Sarah kept her voice steady, even as the words cut her throat like swallowed glass. I want Kalen's word that he'll let me go. No chains, no claims, no belonging to another alpha ever again. Silence. Mira looked at her brother. Thessaly busied herself with something at her work table. The tension in the room thickened until Sarah could barely breathe. Kalen's expression didn't change. The bond between them turned cold, then colder, then became something that felt like a door slamming shut. Done, he said. One word. Flat. Final. Sarah had expected arguments, negotiations, the possessive rage of an alpha denied his mate. Instead, she got acceptance, instant and absolute, and it hurt far more than any refusal could have. He's letting me go, she thought. He's agreeing to lose me. He doesn't want me enough to fight. The thought was poison, and she knew it was unfair even as it spread through her chest. He was giving her exactly what she'd asked for, exactly what she'd demanded. Freedom, the thing she'd dreamed of through 3 alphas and countless chains. So why did it feel like losing something she'd barely begun to hold? Settled then. Mira rose briskly, and if she noticed the devastation hidden beneath both their masks, she gave no sign. We have work to do. The glamour itched. Sarah caught her reflection in a polished silver tray and barely recognized herself. Thessaly's magic had darkened her golden hair to common brown, softened the sharp angles of her face, added a scattering of freckles across her nose. She looked like any other serving girl, unremarkable, forgettable, invisible in the way that servants always were to the nobles they served. Remember, Mira murmured, adjusting Sarah's rough-spun dress. You're clumsy, new, nervous. It explains any hesitation, any awkwardness. If someone questions you, you stammer and apologize and scurry away. I've had practice being invisible. Not like this. In the courts you came from, they knew what you were. Here you're nothing, less than nothing. It's a different kind of invisible entirely. Sarah thought of the 3 alphas who'd owned her, the way their courts had watched her with fear and fascination, whispering about curses and death. She'd been a spectacle, a monster in chains. This blank anonymity, was somehow worse. The feast begins at sundown, Mira continued. Before that, you'll work in the Great Hall, helping with preparations. Most of the suspects will pass through at some point. Touch them. Trigger your visions. Report to me. And if a vision incapacitates me, don't let it. Mira's smile was thin. My brother has agreed to let you go free. I haven't. If you fail, if you're discovered, if you compromise this operation, I will personally ensure you never leave this castle alive. Sarah met her eyes. Understood. Good. Mira handed her a serving tray. Then let's find some traitors. The great hall swarmed with activity. Servants rushed everywhere, hanging banners, arranging flowers, setting up the massive tables that would hold tomorrow's feast. The execution platform stood at the far end, freshly built, the wood still pale and smelling of pine sap. Sarah forced herself not to look at it. She moved through the chaos with her head down and her tray ready, refilling goblets, clearing plates, making herself useful in the 1,000 small ways that servants did. And she watched. There, Lord Varn, the Beta commander, speaking with a group of soldiers near the doors. His scent carried the oily tang of deceit that Sarah had learned to recognize. There, Elder Koros, one of the council members who'd helped raise Kalen after his escape from the pits. Old, dignified, with kind eyes that seemed wrong somehow. Dissonant. There, a cook passing through with a tray of samples, her face serene, her hands steady. Sarah drifted closer to Varn first. He was the known quantity, the traitor they'd already identified. She needed to understand the scope of his betrayal before she tackled the unknowns. She pretended to stumble. Her shoulder brushed his arm. The vision crashed through her like a wave. A map spread across a table. The northern territories divided into sections, each marked with a different colour. Varn's voice. Once the king is dead, the Southern Coalition claims the eastern provinces. The elders take the west. The remainder goes to... A hooded figure, face in shadow, laughing softly. The remainder goes to whoever survives the scramble, as it always does. More images faster now, messages sealed with unfamiliar crests. Gold changing hands in dark rooms, a vial of something that glowed sickly green in torchlight. And underneath it all, a name. Kalen. Spoken with hatred, with fear, with the desperate urgency of wolves who knew that if they didn't destroy him first, he would destroy them. Sarah came back to herself gasping, hidden behind a column, her hands shaking so badly she dropped her tray. A passing servant gave her an irritated look but didn't stop to help. The vision had shown her more than Varn. It had shown her the shape of the conspiracy, vast, sprawling, reaching into every corner of the court. And the elders who'd saved Kalen. The elders who'd raised him, guided him, shaped him into the king he'd become. They were part of it. They'd always been part of it. She found Mira in a private alcove off the main hall, coordinating servants with cool efficiency. One look at Sarah's face and she dismissed the others, pulling Sarah into the shadows. "What did you see?" Sarah told her. Mira's expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes went very still, very cold. "The elders," she repeated. "You're certain?" "I saw the map." Heard Varn's voice, the eastern provinces to the coalition, the west to the elders. They're not just collaborators, they're partners. They've been planning this for... Sarah stopped, calculated. For years, maybe decades. Since they rescued my brother from the fighting pits, the words hung in the air, sharp as knives. "You suspected," Sarah said. "I wondered. Kalen's escape was always too convenient. The compound where he was held burning down, destroying all evidence. The elders arriving just in time to find him, offer him refuge, raise him as their weapon against the enemies they pretended to save him from." Mira's voice was bitter. "I could never prove it. I had no evidence that it was anything more than fortune." "It wasn't fortune. It was grooming." Sarah thought of Kalen's face when he'd told her about the pits. The broken boy he'd been, the monster he'd become. They made him into the perfect puppet. A king terrifying enough to conquer the north, traumatized enough to be controlled by the only wolves who'd ever shown him kindness. And if he ever stepped out of line, they'd have 100 ways to destroy him or replace him. Sarah felt sick. Does he know? Has anyone ever told him? No one knew. Until now. Mira's hand gripped Sarah's arm. "You can't tell him. Not yet. Not until we have all the pieces." He deserves to know. He deserves to survive. If he learns that his entire life has been a manipulation, he'll react. He won't be able to hide it, and the elders will know we're onto them. Mira's grip tightened. We get the rest of the names. We prepare our trap. And then, when every traitor is exposed and every threat is neutralized, we tell him the truth. Sarah wanted to argue. The mate bond pulled at her, demanding she go to Kalen, warn him, protect him from the wolves who'd been circling him since childhood. But Mira was right. He needed to survive first. Fine, Sarah said, but I need more visions. The conspiracy is bigger than we thought. There might be dozens of traitors, not 6. Then you have work to do. Mira released her arm. The feast preparations continue for hours. Touch everyone you can, and Sarah? Her voice softened, just slightly. Be careful. The more visions you trigger, the more you'll fragment. I've seen Oracle bloodlines burn out. It's not a pleasant death. I've survived worse than burning. Have you? Sarah didn't answer. She picked up a fresh tray and walked back into the chaos of the great hall. By evening, she'd touched 43 suspects. Her mind felt like shattered glass, the fragments held together by nothing but willpower and the driving need to finish what she'd started. Visions layered over visions, meetings in dark rooms, messages passed through secret channels, poisons measured, and antidotes hidden. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. 14 confirmed traitors in Kalen's inner circle, 3 more among the household staff, 2 in the dungeons, and, impossibly horrifyingly, 2 more among the elders themselves, beyond the ones she'd already identified. Nearly a third of his court was compromised. The wolves who'd raised him, guided him, praised him for his brutal efficiency. They'd been sharpening him like a blade, waiting for the moment they'd turn him against himself. She found a quiet corner and pressed her hands against her temples, trying to hold herself together long enough to report to Mira. The glamour was fading at the edges. She could feel Thessaly's magic wearing thin. Sarah. She looked up. Kalen stood before her, and he wasn't wearing his mask. The brutal, terrifying king was gone. In his place was the man who'd knelt beside her bed and tended her wounds. The man who'd told her about the fighting pits. The man who'd agreed to let her go free, even though the bond between them screamed against it. You shouldn't be here, she said. Someone might see. No one's watching. They're all too busy preparing for tomorrow's entertainment. His voice was rough. Mira told me about the elders. Sarah's heart sank. She wasn't supposed to. She didn't have to. I know my sister. The moment she stopped meeting my eyes, I knew something had broken. He crouched before her, and this close she could see the devastation he was barely holding back. Tell me what you saw. All of it. Don't try to protect me. So she told him. She told him about the map and the divided territories, about the planned assassination, the puppet replacement they'd groomed to take his place, about the rescue that had been staged, the kindness that had been calculated, the entire life he'd lived that had been nothing but a long con designed to control the monster they'd created. Kalen listened, and then he broke. It wasn't dramatic. No roar of rage, no destruction of furniture, no shift into his wolf form. Just a slow crumbling, like a wall that had held too long against a siege finally giving way. His head dropped, his shoulders shook, and a sound emerged from his throat that Sarah had never heard from any alpha. A raw, wounded keen that spoke of betrayal so profound it had no words. She didn't think. She just moved. Her arms wrapped around him, pulling him close, and Kalen, the Voidheart King, the monster of the north, the alpha who had conquered an empire on blood and fear, collapsed into her embrace like a child who'd finally found safety. He wept. 20 years of armor, 20 years of performing the monster his enemies expected, 20 years of believing that somewhere, buried beneath the horror of his childhood, there had been wolves who genuinely cared for him. Gone. All of it. A lie. Sarah held him as he shattered. She pressed her lips to his hair and murmured words that didn't matter, just sounds, just presence. just the proof that someone was there and wasn't pretending. The mate bond flooded with shared grief. His pain became her pain. Her steadiness became his anchor. They stayed like that for a long time. Finally, Kaelin's breathing steadied. He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes, and his face was wrecked, red-rimmed and swollen, tracked with tears, more human than she'd ever seen him. "I have nothing," he whispered. "Everything I built was their design. Everything I survived was their manipulation. I'm not even sure the wolf I am is really me, or just the weapon they forged." "You're real." Sarah gripped his face between her hands, forcing him to focus on her. The boy who survived the pits, that was real. The man who tends wounds with gentle hands, that's real. The king who looked at a broken Omega and saw something worth protecting, that's real. They may have tried to shape you, but they didn't succeed. You became something they never planned for. What? Someone who could be loved. The word hung between them. Sarah hadn't meant to say it, hadn't meant to feel it. But it was true as the bond that connected them, as true as the visions that showed her the hearts of wolves. She loved him. This broken, brutal, terrified king who was as much a prisoner as she'd ever been. "I asked for my freedom," she said softly. "I made you promise to let me go. I remember. I don't want it anymore." Kaelin went very still. "I don't want freedom from you," Sarah continued. "I want freedom with you. I want to stand beside you when we destroy the wolves who tried to own us both. I want to build something real from the ashes of their lies. I want—" Her voice cracked. "I want to see who we become when no one's controlling us." For a long moment, Kaelin didn't speak. Then his hands came up, covering hers, holding her palms against his ruined face. "They'll keep coming for us," he said. "The coalition, the elders, every wolf who sees us as a threat. It won't be easy. I don't need easy. I need honest. Then I'll give you honest." He turned his head, pressing a kiss to her palm. "I am terrified. I don't know how to be loved. I don't know how to love without it becoming possession. I've spent 20 years learning to destroy, and I have no idea how to build. But if you stay, if you let me try, I will spend the rest of my life becoming worthy of you." Sarah leaned forward and pressed her forehead to his. "Then we try," she whispered. "Together." The mate bond flared between them, warm and bright and finally fully alive. Later, she would wonder if she should have told him about the last vision. It had come while she held him, a flash between heartbeats, brief and brilliant and terrifying. A child, standing in ruins surrounded by smoke and ash. A boy with Kaelin's grey eyes and her golden hair, looking up at something she couldn't see, his small face set with determination that seemed far too old for his years. "Prophecy," her grandmother's voice whispered from some deep memory. "The oracle bloodline doesn't just see betrayal, it sees fate." Sarah didn't know what the vision meant, whether it was hope or warning, whether that child would be born or die, whether the ruins were the end of something or the beginning. She held the vision close, a secret burning in her chest. Tomorrow they would spring their trap. Tomorrow traitors would fall. But tonight, in the arms of her broken king, Sarah let herself imagine a future where that golden-haired child might actually exist. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 4. The feast hall blazed with light. Thousands of candles burned in iron chandeliers, casting dancing shadows across silk banners and polished armor. The great tables groaned under platters of roasted meat, towers of fruit, goblets of wine so dark it looked like blood. Musicians played from a gallery above, their melodies weaving through the hum of conversation, the clink of glasses, the laughter of wolves who believed they were celebrating a victory. Sarah moved through the crowd in her servant's glamour, her tray balanced on trembling hands. The execution had gone perfectly. Thessaly's magic, holding strong as the condemned criminal, disguised as Serah, had been brought to the platform. The axe had fallen. The crowd had cheered. And somewhere in the castle's hidden passages, the real Serah had watched through a crack in the wall as her false self died. Now came the harder part. She'd identified 23 traitors over the past 2 days, 23 wolves who would be arrested the moment Mira gave the signal, their treachery exposed, their plots unravelled. All Sarah had to do was confirm the final conspirator, a hooded figure who'd appeared in multiple visions but whose face remained stubbornly hidden. The figure was here tonight. She could feel the betrayal like a weight in the air, heavy and thick, pulling at her oracle senses. Kaelin stood at the head of the hall, playing his role with cold perfection. The Voidheart King in all his brutal glory, accepting congratulations for the execution, drinking toasts to the death of the cursed Omega. No one looking at him would guess that his heart was breaking with every lie he told. The bond between them pulsed with tension, with fear, with the fierce determination of 2 wolves who'd survived too much to fail now. Almost there, Sarah thought. Just one more traitor. Then it ends. She drifted through the crowd, brushing against suspects, triggering small visions that confirmed what she already knew. Varn laughing with a group of soldiers, his treachery burning like poison in his scent. Elder Koros, watching Kaelin with eyes that held no love at all. The cook who'd been preparing the king's meals for years, her hands steady even now as she served dishes laced with subtle poisons that Thessaly had already neutralized. And then, she felt it. A presence at the edge of the hall. A figure in a hooded cloak, face in shadow, radiating betrayal so profound it made her physically ill. Sarah moved closer. The figure stood near one of the sealed doors, speaking quietly with a servant. Male from the breadth of his shoulders. Tall. Something familiar in the way he held himself. An arrogance that spoke of power, of authority, of the absolute certainty that he was in control. She had to touch him, had to see his face, had to know. Her shoulder brushed his arm. The vision didn't just arrive, it exploded. Fire everywhere. The feast hall consumed in flames, silk banners burning like paper, wolves screaming as they died, Kaelin on the ground, a silver blade buried in his heart, his grey eyes empty, his blood pooling across the stones. And, standing over his body, the Southern Alpha King. Not a conspirator, not a spy. The king himself, here in disguise, watching his trap spring closed around every wolf who could oppose him. The vision expanded, showing her more. Doors sealed with silver locks, impossible to break. Wolfsbane smoke pouring through hidden vents, weakening every wolf in the hall. Arrows raining from galleries where assassins hid behind illusion magic. The trap wasn't designed to catch the traitors. It was designed to kill everyone. Kaelin, the loyalists, even the conspirators who'd served the Southern cause. Every witness eliminated. Every threat removed. By dawn, the Southern Alpha King would claim the Northern throne, and no one would be left alive to challenge him. Sarah screamed, "Kaelin!" The warning tore from her throat as the attack began. Metal shrieked against metal as silver locks slammed into place across every door. The music stopped mid-note, replaced by the hiss of gas pouring through vents set high in the walls. Wolves began to cough, to stumble, to feel their strength draining as the wolfsbane entered their lungs. And from the galleries above, the arrows came. Chaos erupted. Sarah threw herself to the ground as shafts whistled overhead, finding targets in the packed crowd. Wolves fell screaming, clutching at wounds that smoked and burned, silver-tipped arrows designed to poison as they pierced. The feast hall became an abattoir in seconds, blood spraying across the white tablecloths, bodies crashing into the carefully arranged displays. Through the bond, she felt Kaelin's shift. It was like feeling a thunderstorm break. One moment he was a man, the next he was a wolf. Massive, black as midnight, his eyes blazing with fury as he launched himself toward her. His jaws closed around an assassin who'd been aiming at Sarah, and the wolf's neck snapped with a sound like breaking branches. More assassins dropped from the galleries, shifting mid-fall, their wolves sleek and trained and numerous. Southern wolves, Sarah realized, hidden among the servants, the entertainers, the countless strangers who'd been allowed into the castle for the feast. They'd been surrounded the whole time. Kaelin reached her side, his massive body placing itself between her and the attackers. Through the bond, she felt his desperate command: run, hide, survive. But there was nowhere to run. The doors were sealed with silver. The wolfsbane was thickening, making it harder to breathe. And the arrows kept falling, thinning the crowd, cutting down wolves who might have fought back. Well, well, the voice cut through the chaos, and Sarah turned to see Varn stepping forward. The Beta commander had shed his pretense of loyalty, his smile revealing the predator who'd hidden behind a servant's mask for years. "The cursed Omega lives," Varn said. "I wondered if you'd managed to escape the execution. The Southern King bet you would." He said the Void Heart monster would never let his mate die. Kaelin's growl shook the floor. "Oh yes, we know about the bond." Varn circled closer, ignoring the carnage around them as if it were merely backdrop. "Did you think we wouldn't notice? The way he looked at her in the throne room, the way he spirited her away instead of executing her properly? Our spies have been watching every tender moment." He stopped just out of reach of Kaelin's jaws, his smile widening. "You don't remember me, do you?" "Not really. Just another Beta commander in your endless court of sycophants." Varn's voice turned cold. "But I remember you. I remember the night you burned my Pax village to the ground. I remember watching my brothers die in the territorial war you started because you wanted our hunting grounds." The mate bond flooded with shock, Kaelin's shock. He remembered the battle, one of many. One of the brutal campaigns that had built his reputation, forged his empire, created the monster the North feared. He hadn't known Varn was there. Hadn't known the smiling Beta he'd trusted for years was the brother of wolves he'd slaughtered. "The Southern Alpha King is my cousin," Varn continued. "When he offered me a chance for vengeance, I took it gladly. Years of planning, years of pretending to serve you. And now—" He gestured at the burning hall, the screaming wolves, the chaos consuming everything Kaelin had built. "Now you get to watch everyone you care about die, just as I did." Kaelin lunged. Varn was ready. Silver chains erupted from the floor, a trap laid beneath the stones waiting for this moment. They wrapped around Kaelin's wolf form, burning wherever they touched, forcing him to the ground with their weight. He fought. Gods, how he fought. The chains strained against his strength, links groaning, but the silver sapped his power faster than he could recover it. The wolfsbane in the air made it worse. He was weakening with every breath, every second, every moment. Sarah stood frozen watching him struggle. Varn drew a blade from his belt, silver, gleaming in the firelight. "I'm going to take my time with you," he said. "But first—" His eyes found Sarah. "First, I'm going to make you watch her die." He moved toward her. Sarah's mind went white with terror. Not for herself. She'd faced death before. Faced it with 3 alphas and countless chains. She'd made peace with her own ending long ago. But Kaelin. Kaelin wrapped in silver fighting to reach her. Kaelin who'd tended her wounds with gentle hands. Kaelin who'd wept in her arms when he learned his whole life was a lie. Kaelin who'd promised to spend the rest of his life becoming worthy of her. She couldn't let him die. "There's another way," the oracle voice whispered in her mind. "The deepest power. The gift you've never used." She knew what it meant. Her grandmother had warned her in the brief years before she'd been sold to her first alpha. The oracle bloodline carried a final weapon, a psychic scream that could shatter minds, incapacitate every wolf in range, buy precious seconds against impossible odds. But it came with a price. "Your wolf," her grandmother had said. The power burns it out of you, uses every drop of magic in your blood. You'll survive, but you'll be human. Forever. Human. No wolf. No shifting. No pack. No bond. Sarah looked at Kaelin, still fighting against the chains, his grey eyes desperate as Varn's blade descended toward her throat. She chose. The scream that erupted from her throat was not a sound. It was power. Pure oracle energy, held in reserve through 3 alphas and countless violations, saving itself for this moment. It tore through the feast hall like a shockwave, hitting every wolf in range, friend and enemy alike. Assassins dropped from the galleries, their minds overloaded. Traitors collapsed where they stood. Even the loyalists who'd survived the initial attack crumpled, unconscious before they hit the ground. Varn staggered, the blade falling from his nerveless fingers, and Kaelin, freed from the concentration of the wolves who'd laid the trap, burst from his chains. His jaws closed around Varn's throat. The Beta Commander died with a gurgle, his vengeance incomplete, his plans shattered by a single Omega's impossible sacrifice. But Sarah didn't see it. She was falling, the world spinning around her, every drop of magic draining from her body like water from a shattered vessel. Her wolf, the part of her that had always been there quiet but present, went silent. Not asleep. Gone. She hit the stone floor and felt nothing but cold. Consciousness came in fragments, voices first, urgent, frightened, speaking in tones that suggested catastrophe. Then sensation, arms lifting her, carrying her, the scratch of rough fabric against her cheek. Then pain, a hollow ache in her chest where something essential had been torn away. Her wolf, her magic, her birthright, gone. She opened her eyes to find Kaelin's face above her, human again, streaked with blood and ash and tears. "Stay with me," his voice cracked. "Sarah, stay with me, please." She tried to reach for the mate bond, tried to feel his presence the way she had for the past days. Nothing. The bond was silent, not broken. She could still feel a faint echo, a shadow of connection, but muted, distant, as if she were hearing it through layers of stone. "My wolf," she whispered. I can't feel." "I know." His arms tightened around her. "I know, but you're alive. You saved us. You saved me." The feast hall came into focus around them. It was a ruin. Burning tapestries, shattered tables, bodies everywhere. Some were enemies. Too many were friends. The loyalists who'd come to celebrate their king's victory, cut down by arrows and assassins before they could even shift. Mira knelt nearby, her face pale, her hands covered in blood that wasn't her own. Thessaly lay unconscious against a wall, the effort of her magic having finally taken its toll. And around them, the survivors were stumbling to their feet, wolves who'd been protected by distance or luck or the armor they'd worn to the feast. "How many?" Sarah asked. Kaelin didn't answer. He didn't have to. Half the court was dead. Maybe more. "The southern armies," Mira said, her voice hoarse. "They're already moving. Our scouts sent word an hour ago. 3 legions, marching on the capital. They expected to find us dead. They'll arrive in 2 days. We fight." Kaelin's voice was iron. "We hold the city. We can't." Mira cut him off, and there was no apology in her tone. "Half our forces are dead. The ones who survived are weakened by Wolfsbane, traumatized by betrayal. The southern armies outnumber us 5 to 1, and they have siege weapons we can't match." "Then what?" Sarah struggled to sit up, and Kaelin helped her, his hands infinitely gentle despite the violence still burning in his eyes. "What do we do?" Mira was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady, but her eyes held the weight of someone who was about to say something unforgivable. "We burn it." Silence. "The capital," Mira continued, "the granaries, the armories, the shipyards, everything the southern armies need to sustain a campaign. We evacuate who we can, take the survivors north to the mountain fortresses, and leave nothing behind but ash." You're asking me to destroy my own city. Kaelin's voice was barely a whisper. Everything we built, I'm asking you to survive, to keep fighting, to give us a chance, to take it back. Mira rose and Sarah saw the cracks in her composure, the grief she was barely holding at bay. The city is stone and wood. It can be rebuilt. The Northern Territories are our people, our wolves, our way of life. If we die here trying to hold a city we can't defend, all of that dies with us. Kaelin looked around the ruined feast hall, at the bodies of wolves who'd trusted him, at the flames still consuming the banners that bore his crest, at the throne platform where, just hours ago, he'd presided over a false execution while his enemies prepared to murder everyone he'd ever tried to protect. Everything he'd built, everything he'd sacrificed for, everything he'd become. Gone. Sarah reached for his hand. She couldn't feel the bond the way she used to, couldn't share his emotions or sense his thoughts, but she could still touch him, could still hold on. Together, she said softly. Whatever comes next. Together. Kaelin's fingers laced through hers. Burn it, he said. And in the ruins of his feast hall, surrounded by the bodies of traitors and friends alike, the Voidheart King gave the order that would destroy everything he'd ever built, and give them the only chance they had to survive. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 5. The torch felt heavier than his crown ever had. Kaelin stood at the threshold of his palace, the palace he'd built from the bones of his enemies, the palace where he'd ruled for 15 years, the palace where he'd first met his mate, and watched the evacuation streaming through the streets below. Thousands of wolves carrying children and elders, and whatever possessions they could grab, fleeing toward the northern gates while soldiers shouted orders and terror hung thick as smoke in the air. Behind him the city waited. Granaries filled with winter stores, armories stocked with weapons, shipyards holding vessels that could have carried trade across the northern seas, monuments carved with the names of victories, streets where merchants had hawked their wares, and children had played, and wolves had lived their ordinary, precious lives. All of it had to burn. The evacuation is complete. Mira appeared at his side, her face smudged with ash, her voice hoarse from hours of shouting commands. The last of our people passed the northern gates 10 minutes ago. The rearguard is holding position. And the southern armies? 2 hours out. Maybe less. Their scouts have been probing our defenses all morning. 2 hours. That was all the time he had to destroy everything he'd ever built. Kaelin looked at the torch in his hand. The flame danced in the wind, hungry, waiting. Where is she? He asked. The medical wagon. Thessaly is with her. Mira hesitated. She's still weak. The oracle power, whatever she did in the feast hall, it took nearly everything. She can barely stand. But she's alive. She's alive. That was enough. That had to be enough. Kaelin walked to the edge of the balcony and looked out at his city one last time. The morning sun painted the rooftops gold. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. The wind carried the scent of bread from a bakery that would never open again. He'd conquered this city when he was 19, had watched it grow from a frontier outpost to the greatest stronghold in the Northern Territories, had poured blood and gold and years of his life into every stone, every street, every monument that proclaimed his power. And now he was going to burn it all. For her, he thought. For the wolves who trusted me. For the chance to fight another day. He threw the torch. The oil they'd spread through the lower levels caught instantly. Flames roared to life, racing through the palace halls, consuming tapestries and furniture and all the trappings of power. The heat hit him like a fist, and Kaelin stepped back, watching his legacy become an inferno. Light the rest, he said. Every granary, every armory, every building the southern wolves might use. Leave them nothing but ash. Mira nodded and disappeared. Within the hour, the entire city was burning. The fire spread faster than Kaelin had anticipated. Dry autumn winds carried the flames from building to building, street to street, until the entire capital became a single massive conflagration. Smoke billowed into the sky, turning the morning dark as twilight. The roar of the fire drowned out everything: the crash of collapsing roofs, the screams of animals that hadn't been evacuated, the distant shouts of the Southern scouts watching their prize turn to cinders. Kaelin found Sarah in the medical wagon, pale and shaking, wrapped in blankets that couldn't seem to warm her. Thessaly sat beside her, the old witch's face lined with exhaustion. "She needs rest," Thessaly said. "Weeks of it. What she did, the oracles scream. It's a miracle she survived at all. She's strong. She's human now, or close enough. The wolf is gone, burned out completely. Whatever healing it might have provided," Thessaly shook her head, "she'll recover, but slowly, and she'll never shift again." Kaelin knelt beside Sarah's pallet. Her eyes were closed, but he could see movement behind the lids. Dreams, maybe, or visions. Even without her wolf, the oracle power seemed to persist, flickering like embers that refused to die. "Sarah," he took her hand and her fingers curled weakly around his. "We have to move. The fire is spreading faster than expected. We need to reach the northern passes before—" Her eyes opened. Gold, still gold, even without her wolf to brighten them. She looked at him and then past him, and he saw awareness flood her expression as she registered the orange glow filling the wagon's canvas walls. "The city," she whispered, "burning, all of it. For me, for us, for our people, for the chance to survive." Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she didn't look away. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry if the oracle power—" "You saved my life." He pressed her hand to his lips. "You saved everyone in that hall. Whatever it cost, I would pay it 1,000 times over." The wagon lurched as the driver urged the horses faster. Through the gaps in the canvas, Kaelin could see flames licking at the buildings on either side of the street. They were running out of time. "I need to get you out of here." He started to lift her, to carry her to his wolf form. "Riders!" The shout came from outside. The wagon lurched to a stop. And then, chaos. Arrows thudded into the canvas. Horses screamed. Wolves howled. The Southern army had arrived. Kaelin shifted before he hit the ground. His wolf form burst from his human skin, black as midnight, massive as a nightmare. He landed on all fours, already moving, his jaws closing around the throat of a Southern soldier who'd been reaching for the wagon. Everywhere he looked, fighting. The rear guard had engaged the Southern vanguard, wolves clashing in the streets while the fire raged around them. His people, exhausted, traumatized, desperate, were dying to buy time for the evacuation to reach the northern passes. But it wasn't enough. The Southern wolves kept coming, pouring through the burning streets like water through a broken dam. Too many. Far too many. And then a voice cut through the chaos, clear and cold and dripping with contempt. "Void Heart!" Kaelin turned. The wolf that faced him was white as fresh snow, unmarked by the ash that covered everything else. Larger than any wolf he'd ever seen, radiating the kind of power that came from generations of careful breeding and ruthless elimination of rivals. The Southern Alpha King, Torin. He stood in the middle of the burning street, his wolf form holding steady despite the flames licking at the buildings on either side. Around him, Southern soldiers formed a protective ring, their eyes fixed on Kaelin with the hungry focus of wolves who smelled victory. "I expected more from the monster of the north." Torin's voice emerged from his wolf form, the alpha gift of speech that came with true power. "Instead, I find you running, burning your own city to cover your retreat. Pathetic." Kaelin didn't answer. He positioned himself between Torin and the wagon, between the enemy and his mate. "Hand over the oracle," Torin continued. "Her bloodline is too valuable to destroy. We've been hunting her kind for generations. Every oracle, every wolf who could expose our plans before they came to fruition. She's the last, and she's mine. Never. The word burned in Kaelin's chest, absolute and unshakable. The oracles were never cursed, Torin said, circling closer. That was a story we spread to make them easier to kill. Who would protect a cursed wolf? Who would shelter a bloodline that brought death to any alpha who claimed it? His white wolf smiled, a horrible expression, all teeth and no warmth. Your mate's ancestors were murdered by the dozen. Her grandmother was the only one smart enough to hide, to breed her gift into obscurity. And now the last oracle belongs to the last Northern king. Such poetry. Kaelin lunged. The fight was brutal. Two alpha kings, each at the peak of their power, crashing together in the middle of a burning city. Their wolves tore at each other with claws and fangs, neither giving ground, neither willing to yield. Blood sprayed across the ash-covered stones. The soldiers on both sides fell back, unable to intervene, unwilling to risk getting caught between two forces of nature. Torin was strong. Faster than Kaelin expected. His white wolf danced around Kaelin's attacks, scoring hits that drew blood, that weakened, that accumulated. And Kaelin was already exhausted. The feast hall massacre. The wolf's bane. The emotional devastation of learning his entire life had been a manipulation. He'd been running on fury and desperation for hours, and now, facing an enemy who was fresh and ready, he felt his strength beginning to fail. Torin's jaws closed around his shoulder, pain exploded through Kaelin's body. He staggered, nearly fell. "Stop!" The voice was human. Sarah stood in the burning street, barefoot, wrapped in nothing but a blanket, her golden eyes blazing with something that wasn't wolf power. It was something older. "You want to know what your own court is planning?" She walked toward Torin, and her voice carried the weight of prophecy. "You want to know how many of your trusted generals are already dividing your kingdom in their minds?" Torin released Kaelin, turning to face this new threat. The oracle can barely stand. What can she possibly... Sarah pressed her hand to his muzzle. The visions poured out of her like water from a shattered dam. Kaelin felt it through the muted bond, not the visions themselves, but the force of them. Every betrayal Torin's own court had planned, every general who'd positioned themselves to seize power if the Southern King fell. Every whispered conversation about how the war would weaken Torin enough to make him vulnerable, his brother practicing speeches for the day he claimed the throne, his mate measuring poison into his wine, his closest advisor already negotiating with the Eastern Territories for their support in the coming coup. Torin's white wolf staggered. "No," he snarled. "Lies. She's lying. I can't lie." Sarah's voice was calm, implacable. "I see truth. Only truth. And your truth is that everyone you trust is waiting for you to die." Torin's concentration shattered. Kaelin took his throat. The Southern Alpha King died in the burning streets of the capital he'd come to claim, his blood staining the ash, his armies watching in horror as their leader fell to the monster they'd been told was already defeated. The Southern armies retreated in chaos. Without Torin's iron will holding them together, the fractures Sarah had revealed exploded into open conflict. Generals turned on each other. Soldiers fled back toward the southern border. The carefully coordinated invasion collapsed into a scattered, snarling mess of wolves too busy fighting each other to pursue the northern refugees. By nightfall, Kaelin's people had reached the Frostbite Mountains, the ancient fortress of his ancestors. Shadowkeep, they called it, though no one remembered why, rose from the stone like a natural extension of the mountain itself. It had been abandoned for generations, too remote and too difficult to supply for practical use. Now it became a sanctuary. Wolves streamed through the gates, collapsing onto stone floors, weeping with relief and grief and exhaustion. The healers worked through the night, tending wounds, counting the dead, trying to make sense of how many they'd lost and how many they'd saved. Kaelin found Sarah in a small chamber near the top of the fortress, wrapped in furs, staring out a window at the distant glow on the horizon. The capital was still burning. "I'm sorry," he said. She turned to look at him. "For what?" "All of it. Everything you lost. Your wolf, your power, the life you should have had." He crossed to her, kneeling before her the way he had that first night in the hidden chamber. "I failed to protect you. You burned your kingdom for me. I would burn the world for you." She reached out, touching his face with fingers that trembled slightly. "Then let's not burn any more of it. Let's build something instead." He covered her hand with his own. "What's left to build? The capital is ash. Half my court is dead. The southern territories will regroup eventually. The southern territories are in civil war. Your sister's spies are already reporting that Torin's brother and his generals are too busy fighting each other to think about us." Sarah smiled softly. "We have time. Not much, but enough." "Enough for what?" She was quiet for a moment, then she took his hand and pressed it to her belly. "Enough to prepare for the future." Kaelin went still. The muted bond between them flickered, and for just a moment he felt something, a spark, a presence, tiny and new and impossible. "The vision," Sarah said. "The one I didn't tell you about. I saw a child, our child, standing in ruins, yes, but standing, surviving, leading." Her eyes met his. "I'm carrying your air, Kaelin. I have been since the night you told me about the pits." He couldn't breathe. A child, an heir, a future. "The oracle gift," Sarah continued. "It's not gone. It's muted. Changed, but I can still feel it. And when I touched our daughter, years from now, daughter, I saw her, golden-haired, like me, grey-eyed, like you, and she was leading wolves from both territories, north and south, united." Kaelin pressed his forehead to her belly, and for the first time since the feast hall, he let himself believe that something good might come from all this destruction. The coronation, such as it was, happened 3 months later. There was no grand hall, no silk banners, no hundreds of nobles jockeying for position. Just the survivors, gathered in Shadowkeep's ancient throne room, watching as their king set aside the crown he'd worn for 15 years. "I am not the Voidheart anymore," Kaelin said. "That wolf died in the fire. The one who stands before you now, he's something else. Something I'm still learning to be." He looked at Sarah, seated beside him despite the protests of wolves who still thought an Omega, a human Omega, had no place at a king's side. "My mate has chosen a new name for me, a name that reflects who I want to become, not who I was." Sarah rose, and though she moved slowly, carefully, protecting the life growing inside her, there was nothing weak in her bearing. "In the old tongue," she said, "there was a word for wolves who burned everything they were to become something new. Ithran, the flame-born." Kaelin knelt before her. Not as a king to an Omega, not as an alpha to a lesser wolf, but as a mate, honouring the one who had seen through every mask he'd ever worn and loved what she found beneath. "I swear," he said, "that whatever I build from this day forward, it will be ours, not mine. Ours, built on truth, not terror, earned through love, not fear." Sarah placed her hand on his head, and though her wolf was silent, her voice carried the weight of prophecy. "Then rise, Ithran, king of the north, father of the future." He rose, and in the ancient fortress of his ancestors, surrounded by wolves who had survived fire and betrayal and war, the king who had burned it all, began to build again. 5 years later, the girl had her father's grey eyes and her mother's golden hair. She ran through the halls of the new palace, smaller than the old one, but warm with life and laughter, chasing a puppy that had somehow escaped the kennels. Her laughter echoed off stone walls that had never known fear, never known the cold weight of a tyrant's cruelty. Sarah caught her at the top of the stairs, swinging her up into her arms despite her daughter's shrieking protests. "Mama, the puppy. We'll still be there in 5 minutes. Your father wants to see you." The girl, Ilara, named for the morning star, stopped struggling immediately. She adored her father with the fierce, uncomplicated love of a child who had never seen him as anything but gentle. Sarah carried her to the throne room, where Kaelin was meeting with envoys from the Southern Territories. The civil war had finally ended, and the new Southern Alpha, a pragmatic wolf who'd seen enough bloodshed, was proposing a formal alliance. But when Ilara appeared, the king who had once been called Voidheart forgot entirely about politics. "There she is." He lifted her from Sarah's arms, spinning her until she shrieked with delight. "My little star. Did you catch the puppy?" "Almost. But Mama stopped me." "Mamas do that sometimes." He kissed her forehead, then looked at Sarah over their daughter's head. "The envoys can wait. Some things are more important." Sarah smiled and touched his face, the face she'd learned to read, the face that still sometimes wore shadows of the past, but never let them darken the present. "Go catch your puppy," she told Ilara, "but only for 5 minutes. Then we have lessons." The girl squirmed free and ran off, her laughter trailing behind her like music. Kaelin pulled Sarah close. "She's going to unite them someday," he said, "just like you saw. North and South. All of it." "Maybe," Sarah leaned into him. "Or maybe she'll do something we never imagined. That's the thing about children. They surprise you." He kissed her hair. "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me. The real me. Behind all the armor. For staying when I gave you every chance to run." He pulled back to look at her. "For choosing freedom with me." Sarah rose on her toes and kissed him, gently, thoroughly, with all the love she'd never expected to find. "Always," she said, "always with you." And in the halls of the new palace, their daughter's laughter mingled with the sound of a puppy's excited barking, and the king who had burned it all held his mate close and thanked every god he'd ever doubted for the miracle of a second chance. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, like, and share this video to continue listening to this type of story daily, and also to appreciate this community too. I would like to hear your wonderful opinion about this story. Please comment below.